Jeannie, I'm very humbled to hear about the work that you do, and I hope that what I'm going to say now has some relevance. What I will try and do is talk about some of the projects that Elmbridge Can has undertaken, particularly those that have a health and disability dimension to them that will hopefully make it relevant. All the work that we do is in the context of understanding that when people are displaced from their homelands, when they're fleeing terror, and this is particularly true if they're disabled, they are fearful and untrusting, and people lose their confidence. But most of all, they lose a sense of who they are and what is their personal identity, what is the nature of their self after all the trauma they have been through and then faced with a different environment. So in all the projects that we run, all the work that we do with the people we support, we put an initial emphasis on ensuring physical safety and well-being, physical. I mean, that could involve, for instance, finding a better, more functional wheelchair for someone who has disability, to try and generate some initial sense of trust so that people feel they are welcome, that they are amongst friends, fellow human beings who are there to help, and that they are people that they can trust. And it's from this starting point that we try to facilitate activities which will re-establish their sense of personal identity, to enable them to feel themselves again in a completely new and different environment. In all this, what we try to do is enable them to forge, to create what might be called sensory connections with things that they are familiar with the effect of reuniting body and mind, which can have been separated by all the trauma that people have gone through, and a sense of reuniting them with other people. So what do we do? One example of what we do is when people arrive, we give them an opportunity to try and grow their own food or to grow flowers, growing plants. One of the early families that we helped was from Syria, and I asked the dad when he arrived, what did he enjoy doing? And he said, in Syria, my dad and I grew our own food. So we immediately found him a plot of land and helped him clear it. We gave him seeds and plants, and he produced the most wonderful environment, a wonderful plot of land growing great food, some of which I'd never seen before, that he was able to grow from the Middle East. And he was at great peace at this plot of land where he grew, he still does, grows his own plants. And I remember once being with him amongst all his plants, and I said to him, what do you enjoy about this? And he said, when I have bad thoughts, and this man had been through the most terrible trauma of being physically bombed in Syria and spending time in a refugee camp. He said, when I come here and I have bad thoughts about the past, I feel that those thoughts in my head go through and down my body and into the ground. And in the ground, something happens, and those thoughts come up and are changed, and they're plants, they're food. And that was wonderful. And he came there with his family to do that. So that was a wonderful sense of he was getting energy and peace by feeling rooted in a new environment. And that was profound for him. Other things we do is provide bicycles, which enables people to get around the local community, or helping them walking, or walking with them if they are disabled. And that, again, is taking energy from their surroundings, which helps reforge that connection between what is sensory and what is going on in their minds. And in that, they re-establish themselves. Cooking food together is another example, which is highly sensory. And of course, it relates back to their own cultural heritage of what they have done through their lives. Sewing and knitting, and we don't just limit it to women, although I haven't had many men who've taken up sewing and knitting, but that would be an example. Yoga and Pilates are other examples of where people are getting back in touch physically with their feelings. One-to-one English lessons, again, it's a sense of connection. What we're trying to do is forge reconnections, all those roots that have been pulled up in the trauma of leaving. We're trying to reconnect those roots. And I particularly, as Jeannie was saying earlier, I've been struck by how young people have been able, our young volunteers have been able to work with young people one-to-one. A local school has helped hugely with giving one-to-one instruction. And there's something about the bond between young people where they have less prejudices, less, as we say in English, baggage, and they're able to help young people one-to-one. And simply having fun, enabling children to just forget for a moment what they've been through. So having magic shows for young children has been very helpful after the traumas they've been through, so that not all life is grim. Going to events, having time out of home, whether it's to a local place like Hampton Court that Jeannie mentioned, or going somewhere else to the seaside, to London. All these things help reorientate and give people a sense of who they are themselves. And particularly, it's been helpful with the Ukrainian people that we have supported, running seminars for helping them to get into employment with one-to-one advice. So all this is about reconnecting where things had been pulled apart during the traumatic transition from what has been happening at home. So those are some examples of the projects that we've done. You also asked me to talk a little bit about how we can influence local and state decisions. Well, on a local level, we work in partnership with our local area. And here, we've learned a lot. What we need to do is to complement each other. So what the charity does complements what the council, the local authority, does. And you need a clear agreement at the outset of this partnership on who does what, because without that, there tends to be conflict and it undermines the development of trust. And that development of trust I talked about earlier is terribly, terribly important, because what war does and the trauma of leaving places is undermine people's trust. And their first instinct is to blame people, to look for the bad guys, when actually what is needed in working in partnership is trust. And so if mistakes are made, the finger of blame isn't pointed at people, but we look for mutual solutions working together. So that is on a local level. Trying to influence national policy, we try to tell stories, a narrative to representatives of national government that will complement facts and figures. So when we talk to representatives of national government, we tend to go with people that we support. We go with them to tell their stories, to affect them emotionally, as well as just presenting them with figures. Because what we're trying to do, and what we're trying to do the whole time in all the work that we do, whether it's with a member of parliament or a national government, or with our volunteers and the people we work with, is to generate empathy so that people can put themselves emotionally in the shoes of the people in front of them, and therefore have an instinct immediately on what their needs are and can support them. So the theme running through what I've said is to generate trust, where trust is in short supply in terms of the implications of of conflict, and to try and open up connections on an emotional level, not just on a rational, factual level. I hope that's helpful. I'm very ready to take questions if there are any, and I just hope that had some relevance for your conference.